Welcome back to Morocco Before You Go, the travel and culture podcast from City Walk Guides. I'm Sarah, and with me as always is Rami, our Morocco expert and guide. We are now 4 episodes into this series, and if you've been following along from the beginning, you've already built quite a foundation. Episode 1, we broke down the misconceptions. Morocco isn't the Middle East, it isn't mostly desert, and your French will get you somewhere, but not everywhere. Episode 2, Rami took us through 3,000 years of history, from the amazing peoples and Roman volubilis, through the great dynasties, the Almoravids, Almohads, Marinids, and Saadians, all the way to independence in 1956. And last week in episode 3, we went deep into the people, the amazing communities, the Andalusian and Jewish and Gnawa layers of Moroccan identity, and those specific words in Dardia that will genuinely change how locals respond to you. Today we turn all of that foundation into a very practical conversation about where you're actually going to spend your time.
And this is the episode that connects everything we've covered to real decisions. Because all of those dynasties we discussed, they each chose a city as their seat of power. They built in it, they invested in it, they tried to make it the greatest city in the world. And those choices are written in stone that you can still walk through today.
We're talking about Morocco's 4 imperial capitals, Fez, Marrakesh, Meknes, and Rabat. And we're going to spend this episode going through each one, what they feel like on the ground, what you genuinely cannot miss, what the honest trade-offs are, and most importantly, who each city is really for. Because figuring out which combination of these cities belongs in your trip is, genuinely, the biggest planning decision you will make.
That's right, and I want people to walk away from this episode with a framework for making that decision, not just a list of superlatives. Every one of these cities is remarkable. They are also very different from each other. The right answer for your trip depends entirely on what you want from it.
Perfect. Let's start at the beginning, with the city that you've described before as the place that changed the way you thought about what a city could even be.
Fez.
Tell me what it actually feels like to walk into Fez for the first time.
You come through Bab Boujalud, the famous western entrance, a triple-arched gateway, one large central horseshoe arch, flanked by 2 smaller ones on either side. The outside is faced in blue Ziali tilework, representing the ceramic craft tradition of Fez. And the inner side, looking back toward the Medina, is tiled in green, the color of Islam, chosen also to echo the green rooftops of the nearby mosque that becomes visible through the central arch as you pass through. Now, interestingly, the gate looks genuinely ancient, but it was actually built in 1913 during the French Protectorate, designed to replace a simpler entrance with something grander and more formal. Once you step through it, the open plaza disappears. The streets immediately narrow to the width of your outstretched arms, sometimes less, and you are inside the world's largest living medieval city.
That transition sounds almost theatrical.
It is, even when you know it's coming. The light drops because the buildings lean toward each other overhead, 4 and 5 stories pressing together until there's only a sliver of sky between them. You can smell bread from a communal oven somewhere close, and the sharp, primal smell of the tanneries from further away. A child runs past. A donkey loaded with goods rounds a corner, and the handler calls ahead for you to press yourself against the wall. And somewhere in the labyrinth, 2 minarets are answering each other with the call to prayer, slightly off-tempo, one a few seconds behind the other.
That's a remarkable amount happening at once.
And it never stops. Fez el Bali, the old city, has been continuously inhabited since the 9th century. This is not a preserved historic district. It is a living city of roughly 250,000 people, and they are going about their actual lives while you wander through it. The butcher is butchering. The baker is loading bread onto a wooden paddle. The students at the Qarawiyyin are arguing about theology. You are walking through someone's neighborhood. They are not walking through your tourist attraction.
Let's talk about the Qarawiyyin, because we touched on it in episode 2, but I want more.
The University of Al-Qarawiyyin was founded in 859 of the Common Era. That makes it the oldest continuously operating university in the world, a fact that both Guinness and UNESCO confirm. Oxford is usually dated to around 1096. The Sorbonne was founded in 1257. The Qarawiyyin was nearly 200 years old when Oxford was established, and it was founded by a woman, Fatima al-Fihri, the daughter of a wealthy Fez merchant who used her inheritance to endow first the mosque and then the university around it. Moroccans know this story by heart. They tell it with tremendous pride, and deservedly so.
And it's still operating today.
Still awarding degrees, still teaching Islamic jurisprudence, Arabic linguistics, theology. The same core disciplines that drew scholars from Andalusia, from sub-Saharan Africa, from across the medieval Islamic world. Fez in the 12th and 13th centuries was what Paris and London were becoming 2 or 3 centuries later, the intellectual capital of a civilization.
And you feel that history, walking the streets, it's not just something you read on a plaque.
This is the thing about Fez that I struggle to explain and that people always understand the instant they arrive. The city has a gravity, a weight of accumulated time. In Marrakesh, the Medina has an outward-facing energy. It performs for you brilliantly. Fez doesn't perform. It doesn't particularly need your attention. It has been here for 12 centuries. It will be here long after you've gone. You are welcome in Fez, but the city is not waiting for you.
Give me the specific things a visitor cannot miss.
The Chouara tannery first, without any hesitation. You approach through the leather quarter, and the shop terraces around the edges will let you up to look down. They're hoping you'll buy something, which is fine. From up there you look into dozens of circular stone vats, each filled with a different natural dye. Saffron yellow, poppy red, indigo blue. Workers stand in the vats, treading the leather with their feet and hands, turning the hides in techniques that haven't fundamentally changed since the medieval period. The smell is powerful. Rawhide and pigeon dung used as a softening agent, and the shops will hand you a sprig of fresh mint at the entrance. Take it.
Good practical advice.
The Bouinania Madrasa is the other unmissable one. 14th century, built by the Marinid Sultan Abu Inan. Every surface is decorated. Carved cedar at the top, carved plaster in the middle, zelly tile work at the bottom. The craftsmanship is so precise it looks machine-made, and the fact that it's entirely done by hand makes it almost incomprehensible to stand inside. Across the street is the Dar al-Magana, the public water clock, completed in 1357 by the engineer Tlemceni. It was a weight and water mechanism, 12 windows, brass bowls, designed to mark the hours of prayer. It stopped working centuries ago when the Saadians relocated the capital, but the hydraulic principles behind it are well documented by historians of medieval Islamic engineering. What makes it remarkable isn't mystery, it's sheer craft. The precision achieved in the 14th century, using wood and water and brass, is genuinely extraordinary.
Medieval hydraulic engineering. You have to respect that.
Fez will make you respect a great many things you didn't expect to. And then there's Fez El Judid, the new Fez, which is only new by Moroccan standards, meaning it was founded in the 13th century by the Marinids. The royal palace complex is there, and the old Jewish Mellah, the quarter established in 1438 under the Marinid king Abd el-Haq II, making it the first designated Jewish quarter in all of Morocco. The Mellah of Fez set the architectural blueprint for what came after, the physical placement of the community near the royal palace, a covered market, high-walled streets, a cemetery at the edge. That pattern was later copied in Marrakesh and Meknes.
1438. That's a very specific date with a very deliberate reason behind it.
It was a calculated act of state planning, protection, and proximity to power, in exchange for the community's commercial skills and loyalty to the Sultan. The Mellah today still has a covered market and a cemetery whose inscriptions go back centuries. It's an active neighborhood, not a museum, and it tells you something very specific about the depth of Jewish presence in Moroccan cities over a very long time.
Is the Mellah a place visitors can actually explore?
Very much so. Some buildings are being restored. Some are in use. Some are in that particular state of beautiful decay that Moroccan cities do so well. And our Fez tour in the Morocco Audio Tour offline app takes you through all of this. From the tanneries through the Medina neighborhoods to the royal gates, with the kind of detail that a place this complex genuinely needs, including how to navigate by sensory cues when your phone signal drops, which it will.
Okay, but Fez has a reputation, and I want to be honest about it. What's the real version of the difficulty?
The learning curve in Fez is steeper than in any other Moroccan city. The old Medina has 9,000 streets. Your phone signal drops in and out. You will be approached by people offering to guide you, and some of them are running operations where they lead you to a carpet shop instead of the tannery. Not because of some universal character flaw, but because the tourist economy around Fez's most famous sites generates real pressure, and some people respond to that by improvising an income from visitors.
How do you navigate it?
2 things before you even walk through the gate. Download Google Maps offline for the Medina. Your signal will drop in and out, but the offline map holds, and Fez El Bali is detailed enough on it to be genuinely useful when you need to find your way back. And the Morocco Audio Tour offline app works the same way. No connection needed, and it gives you context on the spots as you reach them, rather than you having to search for information mid-alley. Beyond the technology, though, learn the city's grammar before you arrive. Every neighborhood organizes itself around the same 5 anchors: the mosque, the communal bakery, the hammam, the Quranic school, and the fountain. When you feel lost, find one of those, and you can reorient. And navigate by smell and sound as much as by map. The tannery has a very specific scent radius. The metalworkers' quarter is unmistakably loud. The bread ovens have their own warmth in the air. The city tells you where you are if you're paying attention. The last piece is mindset. On day 1, don't fight the disorientation. Pick Bab Boujalou as your home base and wander outward without an agenda. Let the city show you what it wants to show you. On day 2, once you have a feel for the distances and the rhythms, go looking for the specific things. That sequence changes everything. Episode 8 of this series goes deep into exactly this.
Who is Fez for? The ideal Fez visitor.
Someone genuinely curious. Someone who is comfortable being confused for a while before things click into place. Someone who cares about history as something felt rather than something memorized. Someone who can slow down. Give it 2 nights minimum, 3 if you can, and let it unfold, because it will. The first day is disorientation. The second day is orientation. The third day you start to feel at home.
You've called it the most extraordinary place you've been in Morocco, and you were born in Morocco.
Fez El Bali is the largest intact medieval urban environment on Earth, and it is still alive. The Qarawiyyin is still teaching. The tanneries still use methods from the 11th century. The water channels that Idris II laid out in the 9th century still run under the streets. There is no comparable place anywhere in the world. Marrakesh is magnificent, but Fez is irreplaceable.
Let's move to the opposite end of the spectrum, Marrakesh, the showman.
The showman, with complete affection. It is a city that knows it is being watched, and it performs accordingly, and the performance is world-class.
What do you mean when you say it knows it's being watched?
Marrakesh has always been a crossroads city, founded by the Almoravids in the 11th century as the southern gateway, facing the Sahara trade routes on one side, protected by the Atlas Mountains behind. It has always been a place where things were exchanged: goods, cultures, spectacle. Jama el Funa, the central square, has been a performance space for at minimum 1,000 years. The tradition of storytelling, acrobatics, and music there is not a tourist invention. It predates modern tourism by centuries.
Tell me about Jama el Funa.
During the day, it's relatively relaxed. Orange juice vendors pressing fresh juice for a few dirhams, acrobat troupes working for tips, henna artists with their intricate patterns. Then the sun starts to go down. Within about 40 minutes, the square transforms completely. Food stalls wheel out from the sides, dozens of them, each with a number and a caller out front inviting you to sit. The smoke from 100 grills rises into the sky together. Snake charmers take their positions. Gnawa musicians in embroidered robes set up their metal castanets and their Gwembri bass lutes. A man is telling an elaborate story in Daria to a crowd of 50 people, and you understand nothing but you feel every rhythm of it. When the crowd laughs, when they lean forward, when they react to a twist. It is simultaneous and overlapping and chaotic in a way that should not work, and it absolutely does.
That square has a UNESCO designation, right?
UNESCO recognized Jama el-Funa as intangible cultural heritage, specifically the oral traditions and social practices, the transmission of culture that happens in that space. Not the physical square, but the living practice. That's a rare and specific type of protection, and it reflects that what happens there is genuinely irreplaceable.
Beyond the square, what should people actually do in Marrakesh?
The palaces. The Bahia Palace was built by a 19th century Grand Vizier, over 150 rooms, constructed and expanded over years as his household grew. Grand courtyards with orange trees and zeligi floors and painted cedar ceilings, somehow both magnificent and oddly intimate at the same time. Then the Saadian tombs, burial chambers of the Saadian dynasty, sealed by a later sultan who wanted to erase their legacy from history. They were sealed, completely forgotten, then rediscovered in 1917 through French aerial photography. When the gates were opened, inside were over 100 beautifully decorated tombs, perfectly preserved by 3 centuries of accidental neglect. That detail says something profound about Morocco. Things get covered over and forgotten, and then you open a door and find a masterpiece inside.
That's the second or third time you've described something sealed and then discovered. That really is a pattern.
Morocco has so much history, layered so densely, that things get buried and found again with some regularity. It gives the country a quality of ongoing discovery that I find extraordinary to be around.
What about the souks? Because Marrakesh is where a lot of first-timers do their first serious shopping.
The souks are organized by craft, which is true of all Moroccan medinas, but is particularly clear in Marrakesh. The leather souk, the spice quarter, the metalworkers, the dyers, the carpenters, each with its own smell and sound and visual character. The spice market has those famous piles of vivid powder, turmeric, paprika, ras el hanout, in its dozen regional variants, that photographed beautifully. But the real value is in slowing down and having a conversation with someone who knows what you're looking at. We do a whole episode on crafts in episode 10, and Marrakesh souks are a primary reference throughout.
And the Majorelle Garden? That seems to be everywhere on social media.
Genuinely beautiful and genuinely crowded in peak season. The French painter Jacques Majorelle spent about 40 years designing it in the 1930s, filling it with plants from around the world and painting the buildings in an intense cobalt blue he invented specifically for the place, now called Majorelle Blue, and you will see it everywhere in Moroccan design. Yves Saint Laurent purchased and restored it in the 1980s. Inside is the Berber Museum, one of the better introductions to amazing material culture in the country. If you're going, go at opening time, before 9 in the morning. Early light, the birds, no crowds. One of the more peaceful hours you can spend in this city.
What are the honest trade-offs of Marrakesh?
It is the most tourist-developed city in Morocco by a significant margin. The infrastructure is excellent, the riads are world-class at every price point, the restaurants are good. The trade-off is that some of it feels managed rather than alive. Parts of the souk area sell mass-produced goods you could find anywhere. The pressure from sellers in the busiest areas can be persistent and tiring. And the square itself, in peak season, can become so crowded that the magic is hard to feel under the weight of everyone trying to experience it simultaneously.
How do you find the real version of Marrakesh? The one underneath the performance?
Get up before 8. The square at 7 in the morning is an entirely different place. Locals doing their routines, the city going to work, almost no visitors in sight. The neighborhood around the Mellah, the old Jewish quarter to the south of the central souks, is quieter and more genuinely lived in. There are cafes there where breakfast costs what you'd pay for a bottle of water in the tourist center. And there are neighborhoods on the eastern and southern edges of the Medina that are completely authentic and almost completely unvisited because they're a 10-minute walk further than most people bother to go.
Who is Marrakesh for?
For first-timers who want the full sensory introduction to Morocco in the most concentrated possible form. For people who want excellent accommodation and good food, because Marrakesh genuinely excels at both. For people who want a base, the Atlas Mountains are 45 minutes away. Essaouira on the coast is 3 hours. The desert road starts here. And for people who want to feel like they're in the Morocco they've imagined, that version of Morocco is real and it lives in Marrakesh. Sometimes it's slightly theatrical. The theater is still worth attending.
City number 3. The one you say most travelers are actively making a mistake by skipping. Though I should say, after the grandeur of Marrakesh, what kind of traveler is actually ready for something built on a completely different scale and purpose?
That's exactly the question Meknes answers. Marrakesh is the showman. Meknes is the monument. A city built not to welcome you, but to overwhelm you, specifically to overwhelm the rivals of the Sultan who constructed it.
Make the case for staying.
25 kilometers of walls. That is the first number you need to hold in your head when you think about Meknes. Sultan Moulay Ismail, who made it his capital in the 1670s, built 25 kilometers of imperial walls around his city. He also built 27 palaces inside those walls, 12 gates, royal stables for 12,000 horses, and granaries large enough to feed an army for 20 years. He did this in roughly 40 years, while managing a fractious empire, fighting Ottoman incursions from the east, and conducting sophisticated diplomacy with the courts of Europe.
And you've mentioned before the French parallel, Moulay Ismail and Louis XIV at exactly the same time.
Exact contemporaries. Versailles and Meknes being built in the same decades by two absolute monarchs who both understood architecture as a declaration of total power. Louis XIV sent an ambassador to Meknes who wrote back to Versailles describing what he'd seen, the gates, the walls, the stables, the scale of it. There was an ongoing diplomatic exchange between the two courts, and in one of his letters, Moulay Ismail formally proposed marriage to a member of the French royal family. Louis declined, diplomatically, as between equals.
He wanted to marry into the most powerful royal house in Europe.
He was operating on that level. That is the scale of the man and the city he built, and almost nobody outside Morocco knows it exists. I find that genuinely strange every time I think about it.
What does that ambition look like when you're standing in front of it?
Bab Mansour is the answer. The main ceremonial gate into the Imperial Quarter, one of the most theatrical pieces of monumental architecture in Africa. The arches rise to perhaps 20 meters. The entire surface is covered in Zellish tile work in patterns that seem to shift and move as the light changes across the day. The columns flanking the entrance were brought from Volubilis, the Roman city 20 kilometers north, because Moulay Ismail was not modest about appropriating grandeur wherever he could find it. He saw those Roman columns standing in a field and decided they belonged in his capital.
What's behind the gate?
The imperial city still being studied and partially excavated. The royal stables, Harry S. Suwani, are enormous roofless halls now, the roof having collapsed in an 18th century earthquake. But even the ruins convey the scale. Row after row of stone arches, the slots between them where the horses stood, underground water channels that brought fresh water directly to each stall. Next to the stables are the granaries, built with an underground ventilation system that maintained cool temperatures without any refrigeration. Engineers who study it can explain the principles, but cannot fully replicate the efficiency of it using the same materials.
And there's something darker underneath all of this.
The Habs Qara, the prison of Moulay Ismail, where Christian captives taken from European ships in coastal raids, soldiers from military engagements, were held while their governments negotiated ransoms. Estimates suggest tens of thousands over the course of his long reign. European courts sent missions to Meknes constantly. The city was on the map of the world in a way that surprises modern visitors completely. The underground prison is still there, partially accessible, and it gives you a very specific sense of what lay beneath all that architectural ambition.
The Medina of Meknes itself. What's the character there?
Manageable, and I mean that as genuine praise after everything we've said about Fez. The streets are somewhat wider. The tourist pressure is genuinely low. Place El Hedem, the main square in front of Bab Mansour, hosts an evening food market that is one of the most authentic market experiences in the country, because it is feeding local people, not visitors. The bread vendors, the olive sellers, the bowls of harira soup, nobody is performing for you. They're doing what they do every evening.
And there's a wine connection that surprises most visitors.
Meknes sits in a region that has been producing wine since the Roman period, and is still Morocco's main wine-producing area today. Wine is produced primarily for export and for the country's non-Muslim minority, but the vineyards and cellars around the city are open to visitors, and the wine itself is genuinely good. It is a detail that surprises nearly every traveler who assumes Morocco's religious culture makes the whole subject impossible. The Romans planted vines here 2,000 years ago, and the practice never fully stopped.
Who is Meknes for?
For the traveler who wants imperial scale and architectural ambition without the crowds. For someone who finds Marrakesh too managed and Fez too intense and wants something in between. For the visitor who wants a relaxed, affordable base for the Northern Historical Circuit. Volubilis and Moulay Ismail are both within 40 minutes, and accommodation costs significantly less than in either Fez or Marrakesh. And for anyone on their second Morocco trip who wants to fill in what they missed the first time, because Meknes is almost always at the top of that list.
The specific mistake people make here is time.
2 hours, an afternoon at most. That's what most itineraries allow. You see Bab Mansour, you look across Place El Hedem, you move on. Which means you haven't seen the Imperial city or the stables or the granaries. You haven't walked the Medina, you haven't sat in the evening market. You've taken a photograph of the facade of a city and called it a visit. Meknes is a city that rewards the people who stay.
Last city, Rabat. The capital that, fairly or not, has an image problem.
Rabat suffers from comparison. People expect it to feel significant the way Fez does, or dramatic the way Marrakesh is. It doesn't. Rabat is a city of wide boulevards and whitewashed walls, and the particular quietness of a place where serious work is being done. The parliament meets there. The king lives there. The embassies are concentrated there. It functions like a capital, and it looks like one.
Which is not always exciting on the surface.
Not on the surface, no, but this is where people are making a real mistake, because Rabat has more concentrated historical depth than almost any other city in Morocco, and it's all within walking distance, and you can actually see it clearly because the city isn't overwhelming you while you look.
Walk me through what's there.
The Chella first, because it is the most extraordinary single site in Rabat, possibly the most layered single site in all of Morocco, and a remarkable number of visitors walk right past it. You approach through an enormous Marinid gate, 14th century, deeply carved in vegetal and geometric patterns, and on the other side the ground drops away into a walled garden. Inside are Roman columns, Roman roads, the foundations of the ancient city of Sala Colonia, occupied from at least the 3rd century before the Common Era. And in the middle of those Roman ruins, the Marinid sultans built their royal necropolis in the 13th and 14th centuries. Elegant tombs. A small mosque whose minaret has a stork nesting on it. A sacred pool surrounded by enormous fig trees. Cats who have lived there so long, they carry themselves with the certainty of permanent residence.
A Roman city, and then a medieval Islamic necropolis built in the middle of it, and storks and cats on top of all of that.
All at once, in the same walled enclosure. And in the late afternoon, when the light comes through the fig trees and falls on those Marinid tombstones with the Roman columns visible behind them, it is one of the most quietly overwhelming experiences Morocco offers.
What else does Rabat have?
The Hassan Tower. This is the unfinished minaret of a mosque that the Almohad Caliph Yaqub el-Mansur commissioned in the late 12th century. The tower stands approximately 44 meters today, but the original design was far more ambitious. A minaret intended to top 80 meters, which would have made it the largest in the world. The Caliph died in 1199, and construction stopped immediately. What remains is a magnificent sandstone tower surrounded by the hundreds of stone columns of the mosque that was begun and never finished. It looks like a forest of stone. Standing there, you feel the scale of an empire that stopped in its tracks.
And right beside that ancient site is something very modern.
The mausoleum of Mohammed V, the king who led Morocco to independence in 1956. An active royal site, still guarded with a ceremonial patrol, the interior carved in plaster and cedar and zillige. It is a moving place. And then across the city, the Mohammed VI Museum of Modern and Contemporary Art, which opened in 2014, the first major public museum built in Morocco since independence, and its collection shows a side of contemporary Moroccan creativity that many visitors genuinely do not expect to find.
And the Medina?
Rabat's Medina was largely built by the Andalusian community, the refugees from the Reconquista, the community we discussed in episode 3. And you can see it in the physical layout. The streets are somewhat wider and more orderly than Fez, reflecting a community that was rebuilding deliberately on a grid rather than growing organically over centuries. The craft tradition there is embroidery, Rabat embroidery, silk thread on linen in geometric and floral patterns, quite different from the heavy metalwork and leather goods of Fez and Marrakesh.
And the Kasbah of the Udayas?
One of the most beautiful, small neighborhoods in Morocco. A fortified Almohad citadel on a cliff above the point where the Bourgreg River meets the Atlantic Ocean. Inside are narrow streets painted blue and white, an Andalusian garden with clipped hedges and orange trees, views down to the estuary and across to the old city of Saleh on the opposite bank. It feels more like a village than a district of a capital city, and it has that quality of impossible prettiness that makes you feel slightly suspicious, like someone planned it this way. They didn't. It has been there for centuries.
You mentioned the app has something on Rabat.
Our Rabat tour in the Morocco Audio Tour offline app describes the city as one of Morocco's least understood imperial capitals, which I think is entirely accurate. And it makes the case for staying longer than one night, which is the same argument I find myself making constantly to travelers who have Rabat penciled in as a single afternoon between Fez and Casablanca.
Who is Rabat for?
For the traveler who cares about Morocco's present as much as its past, where the country is going, not just where it's been. For someone who appreciates a city that functions well, good food, a genuine cafe culture, the sea, and for anyone coming off 3 days in Fez who needs to decompress before going home. The transition from Fez's intensity to Rabat's calm is almost medicinal. Walk the Kasbah in the morning with the Atlantic below you. Eat well, sleep well. Arrive at your next destination as a person who has recovered rather than one who is barely surviving.
Okay, decision time. I want to run through some real scenarios, because this is what people actually need. I have this much time and these preferences. Where do I go?
Let's do it.
5 to 6 days. First trip to Morocco. First trip to Africa. Complete sensory overload is welcome.
Marrakesh only, and I want to be firm about this. Resist the urge to add even a day in Fez or a morning in Meknes. With 5 or 6 days in Marrakesh, you can do the Medina properly, the palaces, the souks, the square at sunset on multiple evenings, and a day trip into the Atlas Mountains. You will leave knowing one city well. That is infinitely more satisfying than knowing 4 cities barely, and it sets you up perfectly for the next trip.
7 to 9 days. Wants history. Adventurous enough to handle some navigational complexity.
The classic Northern Arc. Arrive in Casablanca and head straight to Meknes for 2 nights. Bab Mansour, the imperial city, and the evening market, then 3 nights in Fez. Then the direct train south to Marrakesh. It's about 6.5 hours, so plan a morning departure and you'll arrive by mid-afternoon with time to settle in. 2 nights there. That is the arc that makes historical and geographical sense, and the contrast when you arrive in Marrakesh after the medieval intensity of Fez is extraordinary. Each city makes you understand the next one better.
10 to 12 days. Relaxed pace. Wants to see all 4 imperial cities.
Add Rabat at the beginning. Arrive, spend 2 nights, let the city calibrate you to Morocco's rhythm without overwhelming you. Then Meknes, then Fez, then south to Marrakesh. 4 imperial cities, each given genuine time, a logical historical arc, and you end in the city with the best flight connections home. It is a complete trip.
And what's the trap? The itinerary that looks good on paper but doesn't actually work.
All 4 cities in 8 days. It's possible. I strongly advise against it. Meknes gets 1 day. Fez gets 2 nights, which is not enough. You come home saying Morocco was interesting, and when someone asks what you loved, you describe things that happened in passing, things glimpsed through a car window or rushed through before the next departure. You gave the trip your body for 8 days, but never gave it your attention long enough to receive anything back.
Final question. If someone can only go to one city on a first trip, which one?
I said Marrakesh for the 5-day trip because it's the most forgiving and most concentrated introduction. But if someone asks me which one city to go to if they only ever go to one, it's Fez. Marrakesh has inspired imitations. The Riyadh aesthetic, the square culture, the sensory intensity, versions of it have been reproduced around the world. There is no other Fez. Nothing else on earth functions the way Fez El Bali functions, at that scale, with that continuity, still alive. Go to Marrakesh, it's magnificent. But if you're standing in front of a booking screen with one city to choose for the rest of your life, choose Fez.
That is a very clear recommendation.
I have taken people to Fez who said they were only going for a day and extended their trip because they weren't ready to leave. The city does something to you when you give it enough time. It becomes difficult to explain to people who haven't been there, which is perhaps its greatest quality.
That feels like the right note to end on. Next week, Episode 5, we go deep into the Northern Loop, Volubilis, Moulay Ismail, and Fez as one connected story rather than 3 separate stops. If today's episode has you leaning toward that northern circuit, that's exactly where we're heading next. Thank you for listening to Morocco Before You Go. The Morocco Audio Tour offline app by CityWalk Guides has dedicated audio tours for Marrakesh, Fez, Meknes, and Rabat that go considerably deeper into the individual sites and neighborhoods than we've been able to today. And for more information about the series, the tours, and everything Morocco, head to listenmorocco.com. Until next week, take your time. Give each city the days it deserves.
Shukran. Thank you.